This question's from Mike. This is a really good question. It's about hiring your first office person. So I'm going to read the question and then I'm going to answer it. This is an incredibly important topic, and almost everybody I meet is waiting far too long to do this. So the question is, hey Jonathan, this year has been going really good and really smooth. Might even see some growth with a lot of thanks to your software. By the way, Mike is probably one of our first 50 clients at Service Autopilot. So he's been with us for years, and he's given us some really awesome advice and direction and thoughts for the system. So Mike's somebody that we've worked with for a long period of time, and he's been through everything with us on the system since it goes back to day one, back to when it was a little bitty system, and he's been through all the ups and downs. So Mike's growing his company, and so that's a little context here. So he says, I had a question that I needed a larger business veteran to answer. I believe I'm at a point that next year I need to hire an office person thanks to SA and our phone email systems. A virtual office or a person working from their home is easy and possible. How do you believe it's best to take on an office person, fair compensation? And if they are working from a virtual office, how do you keep tabs on them? What would your plan be for hiring that first office person? So again, great question. So, little context, I have dealt with Mike quite a bit over time, and just from knowing Mike and knowing what he's capable of, which is probably true for so many of us, he shouldn't be doing these types of activities. That's my perspective. Just he's way too capable of doing so many bigger things. And so I'm going to do 2 videos on this. That'll be a different video, but keep that in mind as I'm talking. And I'll come back to that, but keep in mind that you have got to be spending your time on the most important stuff. So one of the things that I found is, I don't have much time to do this, but I've hosted a bunch of these roundtable events where 4 companies come to Dallas and we work on their business. And we spend several days working on their business, and for the smaller companies, it's pretty much universal that if they don't have an office person, or if they even have a person kind of operations but don't have an office person, I'm usually giving the advice, get an office person as soon as you get back to your home. And the guys that do it universally come back and say, thank you, I did it, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's changed everything. Maybe they don't say it quite that way, but I get that feeling from what's being said to me. This is a really big deal, and most people put it off too long. So, Mike, I'm just going to run through some random thoughts for you in no particular order that I hope will help you out with this, because I've been down this road several times. One more point of context. When I started the lawn care company, our very first office hire was a stay-at-home mom that homeschooled her boys. And so that was my first experience. Since then, we've hired a number of other people that are stay-at-home moms, but we've got quite a number of people that work in the office. So that's, I guess, at the end of the day, my favorite approach is to have them come into the office, and that just comes down to personality, and we're so big on customer service that it's nice to be there with them and be able to work with them, but it doesn't have to be that way. So, in fact, the person I'm referring to that was our very first hire, she is still with us and is absolutely awesome. I mean, awesome barely describes how great of a job she does. And she's been with us all these years, just fantastic. And she still works from her home. And so I want to make that point that it doesn't totally jive with my personality to have people work from their home, because I like the culture and the environment and people together. But if you get the right person, you don't even have to worry about it. They will excel. And Mike, there's a ton of people where they used to be in the work world. They had kids. They decided to stay home. There's a lot of awesome women that stay home and homeschool their kids. That's really important to them and their families. And so they can't come back into the work world, but they really could use a little extra money in their business. And so I think there is just a massive group of people out there that are available to help you in your company with all these tremendously valuable skills, and they're willing to work for a little less money than what they would normally make as a full-time employee if they could just work from home and have some freedom. So there is this very, very awesome labor market out there that's available to you, but you need to figure out how to manage it and work it. And I'm not the best expert at that, because the way it's worked out for us is just hiring really awesome people, and that's so much harder than it sounds. And then it's not even an issue to manage them. To me, I guess that's kind of the key, and I don't really know how to tell you how to do it, because I've just been very fortunate in this area. And then, if somebody hasn't worked out, we've let them go pretty quickly. But I don't think that you can really manage a person from their house very well, or I don't know how to do it. And I'll be the first to admit that. So if you get a great person that is I think you need empathy, because a person with empathy provides good customer service. But two, you need a person that just has something innate inside of them that they want to deliver quality, and they feel horrible if they don't do a good job, or if they underdeliver or don't keep their promises. You need that person that at their core, they want to be great at whatever they're doing, and they want to work. And when you find that, problem solved, because they're going to do great work, and you've given them an opportunity to work in an environment such as their home and get to do their passion, maybe be with their kids, maybe just be available after 2 o'clock to get kids from school, or whatever the scenario is. You've given them the exact environment that they're dreaming of, and they'll excel. So I don't know how to tell you to find that perfect person, but that's the characteristic you're looking at, and you may have to go through a couple people to really find that. And you might just have to do some little trial and error. To do that, you might start out looking at Craigslist. I just put an ad up on Craigslist. It's $25. You have nothing to lose. There's a lot of people looking. I think you'll find stuff on Craigslist. I would definitely do word of mouth on this one. The homeschooling thing is huge. There are a lot of people out there that homeschool, and I tend to think, this is totally off the cuff, but I tend to think that you get a different kind of person, a person that was willing to stay home and homeschool their kids and do all that entails. They're just by nature a different person. And so I'm not talking about a person that's going to homeschool, that says I want to homeschool their kids, and they let their kids run wild in the neighborhood all day, not really teaching them. But a true person that's really homeschooling their kids, that is a different person. And so that's an interesting characteristic, and there are a lot of them out there. So they tend to probably be more predominant throughout churches. So that would be an angle, possibly. I don't know. I've not done that, but I'm not sure how you would find them. But I don't know how you would do it through the churches exactly, but I'm sure there's a bunch of bulletins or different ways that if you contacted local churches and said, hey, do you know anyone in your congregation or whatever that might be looking for work, and they put out the word. I've not done that, but my guess is that would be very effective. So those are the three things that if I had to go do this right now, it's all worked out for us through word of mouth. But I would start with Craigslist, churches, and word of mouth. Those are the three things that come to mind. You really need to consider your personality in all of this. Can you handle not seeing somebody at the office? Can you handle not knowing exactly what they're doing? If that's going to eat you up and bother you, and you're going to have to micromanage them, it's not going to work out. You might as well set up an office environment. So you have to really think about who you are, because this doesn't work for everybody. And if you get somebody that you just slightly aren't sure about, it's just going to drive you crazy not knowing what they're doing. And Mike, I'm not referring to you directly. I'm just saying in general, you've got to be aware of your personality and what works for you, and deciding if this person if you should even go the route of hiring somebody that works from home. If you do decide to bring this person into the office, because it feels a little risky to hire your first office worker, first helper, you might consider a part-time position and then see where that goes. That's a good, easy way to ease into this. It's not going to cost you a lot of money. It's really low risk. And when I got my very first office, it was only a 10 by 30 office. It was this little bitty, 300 square foot office that I rented for $400 or $450 a month. So if you look around, I don't know what's available in your area. I was able to find something, and I worked out of that because it was too hard for me to work at home with my kids when they were little. And so that was how I started out. And then as we grew, we got a bigger office. So there's some inexpensive ways that you could go about getting started with this, even if you want to bring somebody into your office and have them from day one work at your office. But really think about part-time if this is a big concern for you. Something I learned with the stay-at-home approach is that tracking time doesn't really work. one of the activities that most often necessitates having somebody on your team as soon as possible is that the phone's not getting answered when it rings, and that it's resulting in a voicemail and you have to call back. What I've found is that if you hire somebody and you say, you know what, I'll pay you $12 or $14 an hour or whatever that number is, just track your time, and you're having them answer the phone from their home, so they're constantly on the clock, off the clock, on the clock, off the clock. They're having to keep a time log. It's an absolute nightmare. It's a nightmare for you, and it's really a nightmare, and it's not fun for them. And so that's how I started out. We were just tracking time. When you work on something, when you answer the phone, just jot down your time. When you're off, jot it down again. It's not fair to them because they're mentally, let's say that throughout a 6-hour day, they're on the phone 3 hours, and they're constantly clocking time. Okay, I'm starting the call, so the phone rang, I work the call, and then when I'm done, I move on to something else around the house, and so I'm off the clock. Well, honestly, they're really always on the clock. They're always thinking about it. It's not fair to them to only, in my mind, pay them for the time when they're actually answering the phone, because they're always having to be available to the phone. So what we did is we bought really nice, I think it's like $300 Platronic headsets that kind of will hook on your hip, and that way they could walk around the house or do their thing, and if the phone rang, they could hit a button and answer it from their headset and not have to walk back over to the phone. And then we were doing that, and then we found out, this tracking the time thing is just silly. It doesn't work. So basically, we eventually just went to we'll pay you 30 hours a week or 40 hours a week. And part of that develops after you build some trust. So the pointer there is, I don't find that tracking time really works. It's too difficult. I'd also say that in terms of trying to figure out what this person is going to do you need to hire somebody? Sit down and make a list of everything that you're going to have them do. So for example, you're going to answer the phone. You're also going to make sure that in springtime you're getting mailers ready to go out the door to the streets that we have properties on. You're going to make sure that there's enough door hangers for the guys to do their 9-arounds. You're going to make sure that this data's input. You're going to make sure that you go through all the, so Mike, you service autopilot, so you're going to go through all your to-dos and make sure that they're handled every day. You're going to send out handwritten thank you cards when I get a new client. All these, you can make this list of all these things that you've wanted to do that you're not doing, and then you prioritize that list by all the stuff you got to get done. And Mike, again, I know you're super organized in this area, so you probably would do this anyway, but this was a big one for me. And then that turns into their job description. So on this very first person you're hiring, when they join your team, you're able to say, here's the expectation. I'm hiring you to do this. These are the things. Because if you don't want to do these things, or if you think these are below you, or you think these are not what you kind of had envisioned for this job, it's best that you don't even join the team. You don't say it like that, but that's the idea. Tell them, here's exactly what you're going to be doing, and make sure that it jives with something that they'll be happy doing. If you catch any hesitation, you're like, oh, I don't know, I don't really, I could answer the phone, but I don't really like it that much. Don't hire them. If you catch that kind of stuttering, hesitation, questioning, talking themselves into it type of stuff on anything that you're going to be asking them to do not hire them. Keep looking. And so make this list. It's for you. It'll give you confidence, one, that you have plenty of things for them to do. And then two, it will lay out for them what you expect. And then three, that will give you a means to measure them and say, hey, when I brought you on the team, here's what we were planning to do. And this is what I was expecting, and you're not getting these things done, and you can work through that and get them back on course. But they know what you expect, and that's what people want. At Service Autopilot, we do something called agile development, and that doesn't really have to mean anything to you, but it's a form of, it's how we manage projects and such. Well, within agile development, there's a concept called SCRUM, or daily Scrum, and it's basically it's where you meet with each person on your team for a very short period of time each day, and there's 3 basic questions that make up what's a Scrum, and this will apply to managing this first person, or especially somebody that's not going to be in your office. So they could send you the answers to these 3 questions every day, and the 3 questions are basically, what did I get done today? What's a blocker? So better said, what do I need help with? And what do I plan to do tomorrow? So every day, this stay-at-home person, I didn't know to do this back then. I never did this in the beginning. But again, to repeat that, you could have this individual basically each day send you an email and say, here's what I got done today. Mike, here's what I need your help with. I'm stuck on this thing, or I was working on this for 2 hours, and I think if you'd give me this answer, I could probably finish it up in another 5 minutes versus spinning my wheels for 2 more hours. And then the third thing is, here's what I'm going to get done tomorrow. And that's a way that you could have some level of accountability with this individual, some means to measure them, and some feeling that you know what's going on. If you're communicating just here and there over the telephone and you're never getting these core questions answered, you're always going to be a state of wondering, what are they really doing? Are they wasting my money? Are they screwing around at home? Are they playing with the kids? Are they cooking, dinner and not answering my phone? You've got to build a level of trust. This is one way to start that process. The other thing that I found is that, and I think this will be a core activity that you're hiring this person to do, is they're going to answer your phone. It's very difficult for a person to constantly be in a mental state where they can answer that telephone and at the same time be working on a project. So let's say that you ask someone to please proofread this letter I want to send out to homeowners on a street that I serve, or some other project. I need you to do this thing, and it takes some mental focus and capacity. It's very difficult to ask somebody on your team to get that thing done and hold them to it when at the same time you ask them to answer every random phone call. I found that very difficult. There's a switching process that happens mentally that it makes it very difficult to spin back up into that that mode of working on that project. And so I have found that us owners, for years, I don't take call-ins. You cannot call in and get me on the telephone. It's been that way for 4 years. And that's because I need focused time to work. And we all need to create that for ourselves. And then I do blocks of time that I would work on the telephone. And it's critical to high levels of productivity. The same is going to be true with your team. So if this person's number one, so you made your list of everything they got to do, if the number one thing on the list, the biggest thing I'm hiring you for is make sure my phone gets answered so we stop losing sales, then that means that you have to weight your grading of that person and how they're doing. You have to consider that that's the highest priority. And if they're not getting all the little projects done every day on time, you can't completely blast them for that. So if you say, I need you to get this editing project done, you have to give them 30 minutes of time to put the phone on hold so that they can truly get that done for you by tomorrow, if that's the deadline. So I wanted to point that out because I see this as a real challenge. It's easy for us to say, I need you to answer the phone. That's your number one priority. But oh, by the way, I need these other 5 things done today. And so it's very difficult to give this individual products that require a lot of brain power and thought, because it's very difficult for them to do that and answer the phone. And so if you're going to do that, you have to have flexibility. You have to have a random project list. Do it as you can, and then you can't be mad at them if they don't get it done. You got to also watch them so they're not playing the game. But at the same time, you've also got to say, if this today is you got to be clear on your communication. If this project, this editing project that I used in my example, is the most critical, it gets done by today, you have to be willing to say, willing to let them put the phone on hold for 30 minutes so that they can absolutely get that done for you. The takeaway of that long-winded explanation is, be aware that it's difficult for a lot of people to get a lot of miscellaneous project work done while also answering the phone. So the second side of that is have a lot of miscellaneous things that don't require a lot of thought available. So for example, if I hang up the phone, I could stuff envelopes. I could put stamps on envelopes. I could hand address envelopes. What are all these little kind of menial tasks that don't require much thought that they could be doing in between phone calls? And then for the project work, they do it at a time of day when you figured out the phone doesn't ring much and it's safe to put it on hold, or they do some of that in the evening. So think through that kind of stuff. That's an important thing that I've learned. I also think that from a scheduling standpoint, you should delegate a lot of your service autopilot work out. And so I use Service Autopilot because Mike uses Service Autopilot, but if you use another business management system or scheduling system of some kind, I think that work needs to be delegated out to somebody else. You should not, as the owner, be doing that. However, when it comes to scheduling, this is the lifeblood of your business, you need to be super careful. You really need that person to be ridiculously well trained. And I don't care what the system is, whether it's hard to use or easy to use, you are trusting a person to make the right scheduling decisions, when you're going to do a job, when you're not. And so you need them to really understand the system. You don't want to just say, hey, do all my scheduling for me. It's so critical to the business and to profitability. So I think that the way you start with this is you can have them take phone calls and charge credit cards and update phone numbers and do things like that. And then they can create tickets or to-dos for you that say this person needs this scheduled or this person needs that. And unique maybe to Service Autopilot, Mike, they could log waiting list items. So if the client needs to get a bush trimming done in 2 weeks, they could just put that into the waiting list. And anything that's not a waiting list item that needs to be scheduled on a specific day, create a to-do or a ticket for that. And then you sweep through and handle those. And when the key here, and again, this does not just apply to Service Autopilot, it applies to any business system. The key here is that when you sweep through and do those things, have them sit with you so that they start to learn how to do that in the system. And that way, eventually, after you feel they're really well trained, they can stop creating to-dos for you to schedule something, and they can start doing that themselves. So this is an activity that you should also absolutely hand to your team, but make sure you've spent the time to really train them. Invest a bit in this area to make sure they're really up to speed on that. I'd highly recommend using lots of to-dos. I'd highly recommend tracking all of your phone calls. I think that's a big deal. It's something we've learned that's just ridiculously valuable. We track every single phone call, every single to-do in our company. It's a big deal. I also think this person can do basic accounting stuff. If it's QuickBooks, if, for example, they have to interact directly with QuickBooks, I'm not so gung-ho on that because QuickBooks doesn't have a lot of permissions. So, Mike, I would say in Service Autopilot, let them do this stuff, or into everybody else. If you have a business system where you can kind of lock down what they're allowed to do, I say let them do some basic accounting stuff, such as receiving check payments and logging them, and getting those payments ready for you. You sign the checks. I don't think you turn over your paying of bills to this individual, but I think they can log payments into the system. I think they can do basic functions. They can receive payments, charge credit cards. They can give clients their account balance. They can send invoices by email. They can print out a statement, mail it. You let them do that stuff with some training. That's absolutely something this individual can take over. So those are just a few of the activities, and there's so many more that they can do. But I would think about those ideas and pointers. And Mike, if you need more, just shoot me back a message and I'll record another video. Thanks.